What's up, everybody? Happy Friday. Hope you guys have enjoyed your week. Before I hop into some housekeeping and today's fantastic episode, I've got to let you know about a new sponsor and an app that I've been using for a really long time. You might have heard my episode with the founder, Robbie Bent, but this episode is brought to you by Othership. It's a new breathwork app that helps you take control of your day, naturally energizes you in the morning, kickstart productivity after lunch, and wind down at the end of the day with 500 plus music-driven guided breathworks. Classes range from 1 minute to over an hour, so you can find the best breathwork and meditation that works for you. Plus, here's the best part. You can try it for free for 14 days to learn the ancient practices that make meditation easier. And that all comes with breathwork, and you get to support the podcast and your natural healing. So without further ado, go download the app. You can use the description in the link below or visit othership.us/app. That's othership.us/app. You guys really won't want to miss that deal because Othership is a fantastic app. I use it for my cool downs. I use it for my warm ups. I use it for my calming whenever I start to get really anxious. And so you guys will really enjoy that. And I will also keep you posted on that May challenge that they have coming up soon. So it'll be a lot of fun. Don't miss it. So with all that being said, make sure that you're following the podcast. If you're listening to this on Apple, smash the subscribe button. If you're watching this on YouTube, please consider subscribing. And let's get into today's guest, who is Mariah. She is the host of the Salty Sex Cast podcast. And today we had some amazing conversations around healthy conversations about sex. We had conversations to bring awareness about the topic and how to, discuss that with your kids, which is a really big topic for a lot of us, because most of us, if you're like me, didn't get that talk very well growing up or at all growing up. So we hope to break some of the stigmas around that and to give you guys a fun and educational conversation. So with all that being said, Mariah with the Salty Sex Cast podcast, and enjoy your weekend and make sure that you share this with your friends. Thank you so much. All right, Mariah, we're rolling. Thank you so much for being here. I love your podcast. I love that we have this opportunity to talk, and so I'm grateful.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, we'll kind of ease into the conversation. I've listened to your podcast and I've done, a little bit of research coming into this interview, of course. And so I'd like to give you just an opportunity to tell us about your podcast, Salty Sex Cast, and about your story kind of, and what led you to do what you're doing right now, certified health education specialist and more.
Yeah. I love how you said we'll ease into the conversation. I'll lube you all up before we jump in, right? So my story starts, I guess we can start really young. Grew up Mormon LDS and didn't get a lot of positive messaging around sex and sexuality. It was a lot of like, no, that's not good. And so but I was very sexual and I was very curious and I really enjoyed a lot of that. So, from there, I had a lot of conflicting information and really always craved more. And, when I went to college, I, was in health promotion and education and, where they talk about holistic wellness, like looking at that whole person, mind, body wellness, where it goes from, like financial wellness to physical wellness to like all these areas of wellness. And then no one talks about sex. And so I was like, where does this belong? So I kind of just had this like really curiosity, I was always thinking about it, took a couple classes in college, got my master's in health education and became a certified health education specialist. So I can teach health and, I know good resources, understanding how fear and aversion, is a big thing when people are teaching about health. But then I also became a nationally board certified health and wellness coach. So that really triggered a lot of the sex exploration because I'm meeting with clients one-on-one and I center around body image. And I meet, mostly with female clients and, talking about body image and how much it's linked to intimacy and connection with another person. And just seeing so many women who did not have a good relationship with their sexuality, which bled into their physical, view of themselves and that they have to be this perfect body figure in order to be intimate. And it really broke my heart. I also saw a lot of similarities and was like, I don't have that information for me either. And as I was seeking out more information on sexuality and especially how it relates to body image, there was a lot of tacky resources or just, I don't know, it felt icky and gross and it didn't feel empowering. And so I started the podcast to have positive messages around sexuality that wasn't fear-based and that really helped expand the awareness so then people could make educated choices. There is no shame. I do not invite shame to the table at all. So that's in a nutshell that history and how the podcast started, but mostly because I was meeting with one-on-one clients and I didn't even have a resource to refer them to
Yeah.
support them their own growth.
That's tough when you don't have, and like when you don't have resources that like represent who you are, like who you want to be, right? That can be really tough. So yeah, that's great. I'm glad that we kind of got that baseline because I'm curious because I also feel like we didn't get a lot. Like, I had friends growing up in school whose like parents withheld them from like the sex ed class. And like in school, and whether we can argue about whether or not that's good enough. And but the fact that you withhold them just because it's like a sex ed class, like that
Mhm.
was really mind boggling to me. Like luckily my parents didn't, so I had a little bit of an idea, you know. But
A
I'm
little bit.
right, and that's why I go back. Yeah, we can argue if the public education system does enough to do that. But um, where do you think? Because one of my big questions is how to talk about sex in a healthy way, not inviting shame or guilt. Because
Mhm.
one of the things that also kind of rubs me the wrong way is when people, because I'm LDS as well, when people in or out of my religion talk about sex and they only bring up like the bad things that can happen. It's just really,
Mhm.
it really bugs me because like now I'm married and obviously I have children. So 2 + 2 = 4. And it's not a bad experience. Right. And it's just like you're essentially lying to people when you do that.
It's the Madonna Complex. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with that,
No, go
where
ahead.
you're supposed to be a virgin. You're supposed to be, very clean and pure, but as soon as you're married and as soon as you're ready, you need to be willing and available. You need to be very knowledgeable and sexy. And, it's a flip of a switch because you said I do in a marriage.
Mhm, mhm,
And so that's where a lot of people are confused. Like, I've been all conditioned for a long time. Sex is bad. Sexuality is something we don't talk about. It's taboo. It's behind closed doors, or it's only between this type of person and that type of person, and no one else, and everything else is wrong. To then be, I'm supposed to be really in tune to what I like and what I want and understand how that feels inside my body when I've never even got the chance to explore my body because I was told that was wrong too. And
mm,
so you have a lot of things going on, especially because of education and public education. A lot of it is just anatomy and physiology. So let's talk about the body parts, maybe a little bit of family planning and, birth
mhm,
control slightly, but rarely about boundaries or consent or healthy relationships or pleasure, and how to be in tune to your body. Um, if you understand what it feels like to get your hand burned on the stove, you know you don't want that anymore
yeah.
because someone's told you, right? But if somebody else told you, but it feels really, really good if you do that, you might go and experiment.
Yeah.
So then you
Sure.
have this thing where you're like, hold on, somebody's telling me this and somebody's telling me that, but I don't know who's right until I try. And sometimes it'll bite you in the
Sure.
butt and you get burned and it doesn't feel good. I think most people will agree getting burned on the stove is not fun.
Sure.
But when you tell me that and then it's climax, who lied to me? Like somebody lied to me because this
Yeah.
feels
Yeah.
really good.
You know
Like
what's
I
so
do
funny?
enjoy this.
You know what's so funny is I have this conversation with like my wife in the sense that like I have this conversation about when you're told one thing. So like one of the example I would use is like first sex is what I would use is like somebody tells you it's not like it's this like very obscure thing that happens and you shouldn't do it because unless you're married because or whatever and then you just get this really skewed idea but then you try it because you're like I'm a kid or whatever the reason is right and you realize like it feels good and then you like what else did they lie about like or
Mm-hmm.
like alcohol right like you're gonna get addicted it's great and I'm like and then you go try alcohol for the first time and you realize it might not have tasted bad but I didn't die and I didn't get addicted and you know what I mean it's just like, yeah, what happened there? So
Yeah.
it's true. It's really frustrating. It's like for me, it's extremely frustrating because it's like we should be honest about these things.
Honest about them and really allowing, that to not be scary and unknown.
Hmm.
The hardest thing is when and where do you start? Like, as
Sure.
children, as you're raising children, I have a 12, 10, and 8-year-old. And so we're kind of in the thick of it. We're going through puberty, we're going through a few other things. And it's my 8-year-old who's the most curious. And a lot of specialists will say, wait till they're curious and let them guide the conversation. And then other people will say, it's still okay to probe a little bit.
Hmm.
Um, because if you wait till they're curious and maybe there is, a child who's on the spectrum and doesn't understand some of the social norms and bodily autonomy and, good touch, bad touch, that kind of thing, you're going to need to probe a little bit more. Um, so really there's some great resources out there. Obviously none of them are coming to mind right now,
It
but,
happens to me all the time.
I think the Gottman Institute has some
Oh
good
yeah.
resources because they're really good already with relationships and they're very like lightly probing. It's not like this intense, kink that is over here that can be really
Sure.
scary to go research kind of thing. They're,
Yeah.
usually healthy relationships, healthy communication, that kind of thing. And there's some ways to talk to children in there too. The other thing is to really not demonize sexuality and that drive.
Hmm.
It does feel good to get touched in certain areas. It does feel good to do this and to say that that is bad. Um, you know, using different language on, oh, I guess it depends on where you're at in stages with kids, but it's like, oh, I've
Yeah.
noticed you're kind of touching yourself there. I bet that feels good. And then you get to decide if you want to go a cultural norm where, LDS, where masturbation isn't something that is promoted and actually something that's quite, um, is it forbidden? I don't know the word anymore.
I don't know either.
Um,
Because
frowned
I'll be honest.
upon.
Because I'll be
Yeah.
honest with you. In preparation for this, my wife and I were talking about a few things, and masturbation came up, and it's a very ambiguous topic.
It's
It's a very gray area. Like, and I mean that like, and one of my LDS friends is gonna listen to this and call me on
even
some
bishop to
bullshit.
bishop.
It's very
If you
ambiguous.
go
Yeah, it's
in as
very
a
yeah.
16-year-old and say, hey, you know what? I've played with my genitals. Some of them will be like, you don't get to take the sacrament. You can't do all this. And others will be like, okay, well, just please don't tell me next time.
Yeah,
Like
or
that
like
kind
or
of
like
thing.
or like some people or some bishops or whoever will just be like, you should probably have that conversation with your parents,
Yeah. Yeah.
which
It's,
is what I think they should do. Like,
and even then, are our parents equipped?
sure,
Because we
sure,
have
sure,
generational
sure.
norms that have been passed on. And what is, we have a lot of, anyway, but that's the
Hmm.
parents' choice. So you
Yeah,
can
sure.
decide at that point, hey, I've noticed you've been doing this. Is this something that brings joy and brings value into your life, and how you want to define that in your own family is how you want to define that. So I will not walk all over anyone's values at all. But I will say, does it bring joy? Does it bring value? Is it, something that's appropriate for age, that kind of thing? And that's very personal from family to family, person to person. In my household, it is very normalized, where sexuality and the research that I have conducted, or not conducted, but have looked at, has been, and personal research, I guess,
Hmm. Hmm.
is when you can feel your own body and what feels good and what doesn't, when someone else is crossing those personal physical boundaries as well. And you can
That's
be
a
more
great point.
informed. Hey, do I feel guilty that my boyfriend is, when is going up my shirt and that's what feels wrong? Or do I just not like it? And, and he's crossing a
Good
physical
point.
boundary and I'm
Yeah,
not
good point.
comfortable with him. That kind of thing, where it's like, hey, I like it when I touch myself. So why am I not liking it when this person is? It's probably because there's a clue, a bodily clue, that we're not safe. We're not feeling safe. They're crossing a
Yeah, as a
boundary.
red flag.
Yeah.
That's a great point, because that's one of my questions is like, how do you teach, like, yeah, how do you teach good touch, bad touch, right?
Yeah.
With like with other people too. Like, yeah, it's just a question. What I mean by that is like exactly what you described. You described it perfectly. Like, it's okay. Yeah, 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 yeah. I like that. I got to work through it in
Yeah.
my head a little bit more. But
No, for
I'm on
sure.
the. I like what you said. I'm
It
agreeing
was a
with you.
really big aha moment for me. And it actually caused a lot of grief, because I was like, how many times, and I might get a little emotional. I am a sexual assault survivor. And how many times did I allow someone to cross those boundaries because I thought the reason my body felt bad is because I was going against my religious beliefs, not my own personal
Oh,
beliefs. And just allowing that to be like, because everybody else is having sex at 16. So I can't, I should.
yeah.
When really it was like, I was not ready, nor should I have been in those situations if I had listened to my body and understood what those signals were like, instead of being
Mm,
all signals are bad. None of those should be explored, that kind of thing. So
mm.
I feel like, and so that caused a lot of grief for me, and just anger, anger at the adults in my life, that why the hell did you not prepare me for this? You just told me no, 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 no. And it's damn near impossible to be that protected in our society where smartphones are so readily
Amen.
available. Kids are
Yeah,
exposed to everything. So to
yeah,
just say no isn't enough anymore. And we need to arm our kids with choices and educated choices. So
yeah.
my daughter, who's 8, like I said, is very curious, likes to ask all sorts of questions. She is kind of somewhat obsessed about her period, like when is it going to start and when is it going to feel like? Like she has all the questions, right?
Okay, okay.
Um, very healthy, normal questions. She's just
Yeah,
very like, all right.
yeah.
And then
You
she
just
was telling me
asking.
like,
Yeah.
I don't think I want to buy any more white pants. And I was like, why is that? And I think she was just watching some show where like the
Oh,
girl, and I was like, oh my goodness.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. Okay.
But she asked me, she was just like, um, how old do you have to be to have sex? Because I think she was watching a movie and something like that was happening, like one of those teen bopper ones or whatever,
Yeah. Okay.
on Netflix. And so I was like, okay, we're here. I wasn't ready. I didn't think we were going to be with at 8 years old having that question. And I told her, well, sex isn't just a physical thing, it's a mental and emotional thing. And so you have to be physically ready, emotionally ready, and mentally ready. And I was like, and those can all
Yeah.
happen at
Okay. Yeah.
different stages. So even if, you're 17 and feel like you're physically ready, but you're not emotionally ready, you're not ready. And I was like, most
Mm,
people don't know those differences, or they're emotionally connected to their boyfriend or girlfriend and have been dating for so long, they think the next step is to go all the way kind of thing, even though they're not
sure.
physically ready, and all sorts of things are signaling, I don't want to, that kind of thing.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
So I told her those things and I was like, damn, I survived my first like sex talk with my kids, because I have my
Yeah.
boys really don't
Yeah.
care. They're like more like, mom, just please knock before coming in. Like they haven't really
Sure.
asked anything about like partnered anything yet. They're more, I'm sure, just personally interested in themselves, but I don't know, because
Sure.
I don't probe. I just say please safe. Um,
Yeah.
but that was something I was like, okay, like I
Yeah.
felt like that was a confident answer I could give. I didn't go into all the details. I don't even think she knows the anatomy or like the
How it works
actual
or anything.
act. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
exactly.
yeah. Okay.
Which
But like
she
time and place kind of thing, right?
exactly. And so those conversations, and then I give her an answer, and then I probe. Is that, does that make sense? Do you need more clarity on any of that? And then if she asks like, okay, what do you mean by physically ready? I could have said, something, 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 but
Hmm.
that's all she asked about. And
Yeah.
so that's why it's kind of checking in often with your kids too about like, hey, how we talk about like consent? What does that look like to you? Do you have an example of it coming up? And I've had my kids tell me about other friends that have been um and put in situations that are not safe for them,
Mm,
and not
yeah.
understanding that that was them getting taken advantage of, but they were able to be like, oh yeah, consent looks like so and so, when Billy did this to Susie, she didn't really give consent. And I'm like, ooh, do we have adults in their lives understand what's going on? And kind of things like
Yeah.
that. But
Absolutely.
the pitfall of my kids knowing a lot is, and I had to learn this the hard way with my oldest, is he educated another friend about teabagging. And, it's all over video games, it's that kind of
Yeah, yeah,
thing.
yeah.
But
Yes, I know what you yeah. Yeah,
unfortunately,
yes.
this was a friend who is very, very sheltered. And
Oh man.
family never, I mean, completely has demonized that. I don't even think they kiss in front of their kids, that kind of thing. Like it was just really, really unfortunate that something as dumb as that had
Yeah.
blown up, and this one child really really struggled with that knowledge and felt really guilty of knowing it, and there were some other emotional consequences with it, but
That's crazy. Holy
so it
cow.
kind of blew up.
Yeah. And this
And
oh, go ahead. Go
yeah,
ahead.
go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say the best part about the story that you just told was that your 8-year-old was comfortable enough to come to you and say, like, what's a period, or like, engage with you in that conversation. Like that
Yeah.
is something I feel like we miss, and I feel like because I've done some research on this topic, and I don't think that abstinence only sex education is appropriate. And so
No.
I'm on your side with that. And the reason I don't is because you look at countries like Germany or some of these European countries where it's very open,
Mhm.
and and I'm just giving these statistics because this is what I read and this is what I looked into. But like teenage pregnancy was down more
Yeah.
than America. Um,
STIs,
as
everything,
yeah, yeah,
because it's
exactly.
more conversational, right? I can
Right.
say,
Yeah.
hey, something different's going on down there. What's going on? Instead
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
hiding it in shame and then passing it to somebody else. There are just
Right.
so many things,
Well,
so many benefits
well,
to being open.
yeah, I 100% I agree with that. And the main reason I agree, my logic was like, I'd rather them hear it from me than from
Mhm.
a friend at school, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and not that I would just rather set them up for success so that if they hear it in school, they can pick out, okay, yeah, that's right, or okay, that doesn't sound, and then they can come back and ask us, right? Like parents, like, hey, what I
Yeah.
heard this at school. What about this?
So that's what happened with my son. I had to be like, hey, you are armed with a lot more information than most kids your age.
Yeah,
Because of your mom's a sex educator. Like that's just gonna happen. I have books everywhere, that kind of thing.
sure, sure.
I'm not hiding it. And I was like, but your job is not to educate your friends. You are more than welcome to, if you hear your friends talk about that kind of stuff, say, hey, that's inaccurate. Maybe you should go talk to a trusted adult.
Yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah, yeah.
sure you remember all those myths that like going around in school.
Yeah, it was
Do you
crazy.
remember like if you shake a can of soda up your hoo-ha, you won't get pregnant. Like shit like that. Like
Yeah, it
dumb,
was
dumb,
just
dumb
well,
stuff that is
wild
quite
stuff.
unhealthy.
My wife
Yeah.
told me about this. We were just talking one night, and she told me about this TikTok thing that was going around. Like, I don't have TikTok, but the TikTok thing that was going around that like people didn't know, like when they got married, they didn't know how to have sex.
Mhm.
And so they were like, they thought they were struggling with infertility, which is a real problem, but they weren't because they weren't doing it right. But no one had told them. Like
Yeah.
didn't. And I was like, you're lying to me. I was like, that's not real. And she showed me the compilation or whatever. I was like, this is unreal. You have
grown adults who don't know how to do this. That's so scary. That's scary.
That makes more room for somebody taking advantage
Yes,
than
yes.
understanding, right? You know, if somebody
Yeah.
were saying to my kids or whatever, like, oh, this is okay, because it's blah, 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 it has convinced
Mhm.
them. But my kids are like, BS, that's exactly what this is. And I know exactly what that part is called, that kind of thing. I mean, you even hear,
Mhm.
um, you know, calling parts their names, their anatomical
Yeah,
names, because
yeah.
if you start calling somebody's downstairs a cookie and they're talking about how, you know, somebody is touching that, and they were like, oh, whatever, your stepbrother was eating your cookies, whatever, something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Instead of finding out that there's really abuse going on.
Right.
That's an extreme example. And I'm definitely not about fear. I am,
No, but it's
and
about preparedness though.
it's
Like
about
that's what we do with
preparedness
our kids.
as
And I got mad
yeah.
at my in-laws
Mhm.
because my daughter's 4. And at the
Yeah.
time she was probably 3 or 4. But like she was getting potty trained and and I'm a dad and I know my 3-year-old is just learning how to potty train. I'm like, "Hey, did you wipe your vagina and did you wash your hands?"
Yeah.
And my my family was like, we don't say that." And I'm like, "No." And if I hear you say that around my anything else besides that around my daughter, I'm gonna
Yeah.
flip out. I'm gonna lose my mind
Yeah.
because that's
I
not
mean,
what it's called. And there's nothing wrong with the name. Like, I don't know. It's just
or
I
I
tell my
mean,
son,
it
same thing.
and vulva is more
Yeah.
accurate, you know, right? Because
Yeah. Okay.
vagina is the canal, is the actual inside, right? So she's not
Yeah.
wiping that, but at least when you say vagina, everyone knows what you're referring to, right?
Yeah. Okay. You're right. Yes,
And
you're right.
so,
You're right.
I mean, if you really want to get accurate, you'll have her walking around the store like, "Hey, my vulva itches," and you have someone like look over, like, "Wow, okay,
Yeah.
progressive
Yeah.
parent." But, um,
Yeah.
which I have been. You know,
Yeah.
it's
You should. Yeah. It's great.
paving the way, and especially being raised LDS, having my parents be LDS. This is the first time I'm exploring, like, my kids are an active experiment right now. Obviously, it's informed by a lot of education and a lot of quality resources, but I don't know what this is gonna look like as they're teenagers.
Mm,
And so there's times that I totally question myself and I was like, did I just give my kids too much information? Except especially when that one, you know, kid of my son's or friend of my son's, you know, when that kind of blew up a little bit, there was a huge pang of guilt, and it brought me right back to um the days of being a teenager in the LDS church. Like, it was just the worst feeling ever. And I was just like, I can't win. There's nothing I can do to do better. And so
mhm,
that was
mhm.
something I always struggled with. And I was um, told by a bishop I was a sex addict when I was a teenager. So very unhealthy messages, because, you know, a very untrained person
Yeah.
who's in a room
Yeah.
with me alone. And it was more of, I felt shame because I was sexually active, and I, to feel better, I would go get that instantaneous release from an intimate encounter. And it was that cyclical type of thing. It's a lot where teenagers, especially teenagers in high demand religions like LDS, of like Mormonism, get addicted to pornography because they've watched it once, felt good, and but then they were told that was the worst thing that they could ever do. So then they feel bad, but like that's all they can get off on their mind. And so they go do it. And then it just cycles over and over again.
Mhm.
Instead of normalizing that experience and being like, oh, I bet that felt good. However, pornography is not real. It's a tool that's easily abused. Rarely, I mean, there are some instances where people use it as a therapeutic tool and that it can actually help a relationship and intimacy, but more than not, it's quite abused.
Mhm.
And then there's some people who can easily have a normal relationship with it, just like an alcoholic, versus, you know, they can
Yeah.
drink
Yeah.
when they want and put it down and it's not a big deal. But they also understand their limitations, and they know, you know,
Sure.
body cues when this is becoming a problem. So
I
it's
respect that.
again
Yeah. I
that
respect
guilt
that.
and fear and how that builds into a cycle. It's not the actual thing, it's what they're using for that release or that
Mhm. Mhm.
instantaneous feel good. So there's a lot of youth that are afraid and alone and feel that something's wrong with them because they do have that sexual drive, heightened sexual
Yeah,
drive.
yeah,
Horny
yeah.
MFers out there walking around like
Yeah, and
all
they don't know
bundle of
what to do.
hormones,
Yeah, and they don't know what to do, and they don't know how to like
and they're
safely and
told to just,
healthily.
sink it down, pretend it doesn't exist.
It reminds me of I don't know, did you ever hear about the Book of Mormon musical? Did you ever hear about that?
Yes. Turn off
Okay,
the
turn
light.
it off. Turn
Yes.
it off. The song. By the way, so I think we've already established, like before this interview, that I'm not like, and I hate to say it, but I'm not like a Utah Mormon, and I hate even saying that, right? But like I watched that musical before I served a mission and
Oh,
after I served a mission, and I thought it was great. I thought it was funny. Like
Oh, it's
if you can't laugh,
hilarious.
yeah, it's
I think
comedy.
it's
Like,
more funny when you come from that religion because
oh
you're
yeah,
like, yes, I get a lot of
that
things
get
that
that.
people wouldn't.
And it was
Yeah.
I thought it was funny before my mission. I thought it was even funnier after my mission, because if you took 2 years of my crazy mission and you put it into a 90-minute special, like, or 90-minute Broadway musical, that would be
Uh-huh.
it. That would be it.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
like,
Oh, that's
I was like,
awesome.
I mean, we had everything that happened in there. I experienced personally on my mission for the most part. Like, it was crazy. We just had crazy experiences, but it's like this, yeah, it's like this turn it off kind of thing. And I'm like, it was
Turn
funny
it
because
off.
it was, yeah. I was like, it was funny because I'm laughing because that's exactly what happens. Like,
Yeah.
I think the funniest comedy is like truth. Like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, that's true. Like, that's terrible that we do that. And
There's no validation of the human experience.
yeah.
I am shamed for something that happens that I don't have control over. We don't
Yeah.
sit there and look at people when they have their tummy growls and say, "Oh my gosh, that's so gross. I can't believe you're eating." It's a physiological response, right?
Yeah.
This is something we
Yeah.
are built for. Hunger, pains, and horniness are pretty much the same thing. Like, I mean, you can really look at like how
Yeah. I agree
similar
with you.
they are.
Okay.
A sexuality is just like eating. You have different tastes, you have different flavors, you have different experiences, you go to different restaurants, whatever that is, you can look at all the different, that analogy works really, really well.
Yeah.
But it's something that no one takes the time to validate, right?
Yeah. I would
So
agree.
I'm 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, going through bodily changes and being told I'm wrong to be curious about those, or
Yeah.
there's
I
only
mean, that was,
one right way to experience it. There's only one restaurant, there's only one kind of food that you get to try. Like,
I hear
it's
you. I hear you.
it's one of those frustrating things. Anyway, so that's I have a really hard time with messaging to youth, and that we don't arm them with more validating positive messages. It's a lot of shame-based, fear-based, negative, judgmental, don't do it. But then we know you're probably going to, so then really don't do
We'll
it.
just cross that bridge when we come to it, kind of thing, or we'll sweep it
Or
under the rug. Or,
most of the time when something has already happened, right?
yeah,
A sexual
that's
assault
terrible.
or a pregnancy or an STI. That's the only time that parents, that is exactly how my parents found out I lost my virginity, is when the police showed up. Because I was honest with my bishop and told him what had happened at a party. And he's like, that is assault. You need to report that. Forced me to report, which also is not okay. That should always be the choice of, the victim or the survivor.
Yeah.
And again, untrained people having conversations that we need more training, or not having these conversations in rooms with teenagers.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I can't really argue with you on that. I was under the impression that if something like that, like almost like a counselor kind of thing, almost like not that they're therapists, but like if I was reporting an act like a violent crime to my therapist, I was under the impression that they would have a duty to like report that, right? And I guess that's different. am I
They
wrong there
do.
or?
They have to report,
Oh,
but
but
I
you,
don't have to make a
okay.
report.
Okay.
I don't have to
And
come
that's what
forward.
was different.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Okay.
they have to say
Okay.
something, and then the authorities will, contact that person and say, do you want to make a report or go
I see.
after any legal things? But yes, and definitely in the state of Utah, you are all mandated. Anyone under 18 talks about, or if there's any child abuse, anything like that, you do have to report.
Okay. But the
But from
difference
there,
was that he forced you. He was like, no, you have to, you have to, you have to. Okay. Okay.
and you don't have to go to the police. There are plenty of, sexual assault survive,
Yeah, there's safe
like
ways. Yeah, there's very
support.
safe ways. Yeah.
Exactly. So you
Mhm.
don't have to go to the police, who they get some training to handle these situations, but they aren't
Yeah.
specialists, right? They're there to uphold the law, not to, we have
Not
victim
that,
advocates
yeah,
and
yeah,
all sorts
yes.
of resources that are available.
Who can help
Um,
you, like, if you
yeah,
do, they can help you, like, guide you through the conversation. And
where we're avoiding re-traumatization or
yeah,
victim
yes.
blaming
Okay.
or things like that. And I didn't even, you know, I I carried the blame because I got drunk at that party. I carried the blame until my mid-20s when I was going
Mm,
through school, and I was like, "Oh my god, that really was sexual assault." I I because of my religious background and because I was told drinking and that was my choice, I put myself in harm's way. I have to live with the consequences. That was really hard for me for a
yeah,
long
that's
time to be
terrible.
like, and to ungo or unlearn that blame for myself, and to finally say, because I
You're like,
absolutely
no,
did not
those,
want to, you know, tell anyone or anything like that. But
yeah.
yeah, so those are a few things that I wish we had more trained adults to have these conversations and that aren't shy from this, because I think we just be healthier human beings when we can
Yes.
communicate
Yes.
boundaries, and when we can communicate um consent. And consent
Yeah.
goes both ways. It's not
Yeah.
just saying yes, but it's understanding how to take a no, accept a no. And
Hmm.
that's something we don't teach enough, right? You
Yeah.
hear
Yeah.
yes means yes, no means no. But what do you do when someone actually turns you down? Are you going to continue to try to convince them and coerce them?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
You were
Yeah.
just told they need to have the power, not you. You don't have a choice in that situation, that kind of thing. Or so it goes both ways. And I think we're slowly, very, very slowly adding to the conversation. But I would love to see it happen a little quicker and, you
Of
know,
course.
less less stigmatized beliefs, just because that's what historically we've been taught.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I hate to say it again, but like it's just gonna take a few generations
Yeah.
moving on for us to like.
And by then we're all going to be, anti-marriage and bisexual and just kidding.
Sure, sure,
But if
sure.
you do look at the trends, less and
Sure.
less people are getting married. More and more people are, on the LGBTQ spectrum. Like it's a very interesting place we're at. There's a lot
Mhm.
of theories on it. Is it just because we're inviting more voices to the conversation? There's more acceptance, and so more people are coming out of their closet, or is it just, there's less strict black and white?
Yeah,
We're
yeah.
allowing more differences, and so
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's just back, and this is where my whole, this is, I don't know, and this is good or bad or whatever, but my personal opinion is like whatever you do is like your thing. And like I'm gonna be, I choose this, right? Like it is, this is I don't live off, those old proverbial like living off your parents' testimony or whatever. Like I've chosen this and this is something I want to do, and other people choose other things, and let's all just like I have like, I have really good conversations with people, and I have,
yeah.
and I mean, I just don't, it just doesn't, like, it's not, and I use this analogy very intentionally, not sacrilegiously, but is this the hill that, in my opinion, God died on? And my answer is probably not. Like my thing, my belief is like, I heard this in a meeting one time, and it was from, I had the opportunity to serve my mission. I'm from Iowa, so I served in St. George. So I had the opportunity to be around a lot of general authorities, for better or for worse. But one of them said something really cool. He was like, you'll be so like when all of this is over, you'll be surprised about what God actually cares about, and
Mhm.
how little, like, what we
Yeah.
put stock in, he doesn't necessarily. And so, like, what does that mean? I don't know, but I know one thing: it's not up to me. So everybody, we just get along.
Yeah.
I'll have
Right?
fun. We go our
I mean,
ways.
I use that look at that all the time and I was like, I don't think I'm an evil person, a bad person because I touch my own private parts.
Well,
Like,
well, here's the crazy thing: is like you have young adults. It's like
who
this is
believe that?
biologically what's happening, and I mean, like, you're gonna tell a 17, like, like, I remember going through puberty. That was crazy. I had no clue what was going on.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you know what I mean? And you expect, I'm just saying, I don't know. My whole thing is like, don't be surprised. Like, why are you surprised? Do you
Right.
understand what's happening?
I
It's
can see that
crazy.
there's a time and a place,
Sure, sure, sure,
and
sure,
it
sure.
takes a lot of effort to tell people how to understand the time and place. And that, if you do touch yourself and you're constantly masturbating, it isn't inviting other opportunities to learn, right? You're wanting to shut in your room and and other things and who knows what.
Sure.
So I can understand why at one point it was just easier to be like, don't do it. And maybe that's what happened. It was like we don't have the educational avenues to give you other types of resources. It's just easier for us to say no.
Yeah.
But we can't ignore that
Yeah, we can't do
anymore.
that anymore. I agree with
We
you.
are
Yeah.
at a time and a place that we have to have those conversations that you know, uh there's just internet and all the information. I just watched a YouTube video on just how quickly we had information given to us at our fingertips, and it was like one generation where it was just like, hey, you kind of had books and maybe like some things that
Yeah.
were, and then all of a sudden it was like, boom, internet, you have all answers to everything you could ever imagine,
Yeah.
and it's like we weren't prepared as a society, as a human race for that type of information, that flooding of information. We don't know how to differentiate what's a good resource and what's a bad resource. We don't know how to
Yeah.
make choices anymore, and we don't know how to communicate with each other anymore. Um, and so that's kind of where our emphasis should be. I
Mhm.
just happen to do it with fun sexual anecdotes and have fun with that, because
Yeah, yeah.
I
What?
don't want anyone to live with that shame that I did.
Amen, amen. And I couldn't agree more, because one of the things that I struggle with in the church is these wild conversations that we just allow to happen. Like, I do not like, and I don't know. I got called to the principal's office when I was when I was in school. I get called to the principal's office when I'm at church, because it just had, because I'm like, that's not accurate. You're not telling the truth. Like, and my thing is like, when you talk about sex, I think the most important lesson I learned about it was it's not it's a timing thing. It's just like you were saying earlier. It's when you're physically ready, when you're emotionally ready, when you're mentally ready.
Mhm.
Personally, I would add spiritually, but I
Yeah.
understand people might not, resonate with that. But I would add that too. Like, I,
I think that's
you
very
know,
valid to your
yeah,
your morals and your values, right? Like that. I think it's very
yeah,
great to add to that.
yeah. And so I understand that, and that's a great way to put it. It's not, yeah. And so I heard it once. It's like, it's not never. It's just the right time. And so, but I will, since we've had this conversation, I do have to give the concession that looks different for everybody,
Mhm. It looks different for
and that's
everyone,
okay.
and
That's okay.
comparing it to other people and,
Yeah. But what I'm yeah, okay, go ahead. Sorry, I'll let you finish.
no, no, no. I think that's just a lot of
Yeah, we could spend hours on that conversation.
arguments happen because it's my yes was your no, so you're wrong and I'm right or whatever
Oh,
that
yeah,
is.
yeah,
And
yeah,
that's
yeah,
where
yeah,
it's just
yeah.
like, it's
Yeah,
not.
I'm
Yeah.
not interested in I am not interested in conversations where we can't learn and grow. Like, I feel like if we're both in a position to say like we're comfortable knowing, like I'm very comfortable knowing that I don't know everything,
Mhm.
especially around this. So if we both in a communication, if we both understand that and we're working towards a higher goal, I really don't think you can go wrong. But what I, what you said, because I have a daughter and I try to put her in jujitsu, I try to teach her how to like enforce her boundaries, which she does a great job at.
Mhm.
But what you said was like, no, how do you know what your boundaries are?
Yeah.
And what you how you described that, I was like, that's great because yeah, I mean, you don't know the red flag, like you don't, it's almost like you don't know what you don't know.
And you haven't been trained to listen for it, and it's
Good point.
like,
Good
we've
point.
been trained, like if I'm the hand on the stove again, we've been trained because we know that heat is probably discomfort. So we've had that
Yeah. Yeah.
life experience. But when we're saying no to everything, you're not getting that life experience.
Yeah.
Um, Even asking kids or validating their experience of, hey, that was really rude when so and so took your toy. And, or, hey, I know you asked really nicely if you could borrow Susie's doll and she said no. That probably feels kind of crummy, but I'm so proud of you for, you know, telling her or like accepting her no. That is a huge thing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Most
Yeah.
kids are going to still sit there and be like, but please, please. That doesn't change. I
Right.
remember boys sitting there doing that in high school. But please, please. And, just it changes a little bit, but still, it was like, hey, that was what I was conditioned about. Like if kids,
Sure.
if they ask over and over again, I'm finally just going to break. Or, uh, I noticed you let so and so borrow your toy and they broke it. That probably made you feel really bad, and then just kind of validating that and be like,
Hmm.
how do you know? Or my daughter is a social butterfly, always going out and playing with friends. If there's a day she's not playing with friends, like I'm like, oh my gosh, she's sick.
Yes. Yeah. She's like,
But she came in and was just like, I just don't want to play with friends anymore. So I'm like, something happened. I'm trying to probe and probe and probe. And she's just like, I'm just kind of tired. And I was like, I'm so glad you listened to your body. And that's just kind of like normalizing different bodily sensations for
mm,
knowing what they are. Right. I'm really glad, like, oh, you have a tummy ache and we're about ready to like go to the doctor's office. You're probably nervous for shots or something like, and kind of just tying those
yeah.
sensations
Yeah. Yeah.
to their experiences. They're going to start listening to those and knowing what they mean. I mean, our body does a
Yeah.
really good job warning us when
Yeah. It
we're
does.
uncomfortable.
It does. And I really like how you just keep tying it back to listening to your body, respecting your body and other people's bodies, because it is something. And I don't know. This conversation has been beautiful, but it is something where you have like in any religion, because I also before I got my bachelor's degree in accounting and I went on to get an MBA, or I'm pursuing an MBA. I was like really close to getting a bachelor's in theology and philosophy because that's what I thought I
Mm,
was going to do. So I got to experience a lot of different religions. Like we had to go to some. And by the way,
yeah.
midnight mass, Christmas mass is a wonderful experience. I love Christmas mass. Um yeah, and but like it just in every religion they put a lot of stock in like your body and how beautiful it is and how powerful it is, and all these things, right? And then we're told to like ignore it in this specific conversation.
Mhm.
It's I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. And all you got to do is ask a question and you immediately, question. And you're like, this is a
Yeah.
weird, we're missing something here. So I like that. That's a good point.
It's something we're slowly learning. And again, it's not as scary anymore. You hear sex
Yeah, sure.
education. I mean, there was a sex education bill that was denied, and so frustrating because it had consent in it and they said no. And I was like, WTF, we need more
Yeah.
consent.
Yeah.
Um, but really, I had a guest on, we were talking about why, it was probably shut down. It was a lot of aggressive language that was historically shunned. And, most people were like, oh no, we don't want to talk to our kids about pleasure. but it's really
Oh,
like,
jeez. Yeah.
if we leave pleasure out of the conversation, they're going to think something's wrong once they
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
like, how many,
Yeah.
there's a huge portion of women, especially LDS women, who go see therapists or sex therapists because they think they don't have a sex drive. And it's really
Mm,
because they've been conditioned for so long not to turn off that sexual drive, constantly turn it off, ignore it, do something to keep yourself busy, whatever.
oh,
So
yeah.
now they
Dude.
can't, like, it's hard for them to tap back into it and not feel like something's wrong or they're doing
Yeah.
something wrong. Again, this isn't just LDS women, it's a lot of high religion or high demand religions that
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
can
But it's okay. But it
create that.
happens in
But
our religion probably more
yeah,
than
most
it should.
definitely. I've had lots of conversations with LDS therapists and sex therapists and, Natasha Helfer. I'm not sure if you're familiar with her, but she was
No.
recently excommunicated because of her stance on
Oh, I heard this
masturbation
story.
and
I
all
heard
sorts
this
of
story.
stuff and LGBTQ. And she's been on the podcast.
Yeah.
We've talked about it on
Yeah.
my show. And, it's one of those things that I'm like, we can't ignore this stuff anymore. And those who are speaking loud and, who are overly aggressive are being made the example. And there's things that happen that,
Yeah. Well, and there was another guy who got excommunicated a while ago, and he was lobbying for no one-on-one meetings
and
with
interviews.
bishops.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Her
interviews. Which
and I'm forgetting his name, but
I
Natasha
can't remember.
Helfer and stuff. She supported
But
that movement with him.
and so I don't want to get anything twisted. That was real when I heard that. I was like, I was really shaken. I was really upset. I was like, are you kidding me? I was like, first of all, if a dude, because I don't see like this stuff. I don't see like bishop or like, you're a dude, you're a man to me. And I mean that. And so if another guy said, no, you can't come in here, I'm gonna question your daughter, I'd be like, you can go fuck yourself. Like you're high if you think that.
Yeah.
If my daughter feels safe in there, then that's fine. But if you come out and try to do that to me, I'm like, no. I had a really hard time with it. I had a really hard time. And now that you mentioned this story, I didn't know her name, but now that you mentioned that story, I heard it and I was like, oh my, I'm like, I had a really hard time with that. I had a really
It was
hard time
last
with
year.
that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say it's because the people who speak up, are the ones who get excommunicated, even though I have made that joke on my podcast. Like, I'm like, no, don't come get me. But it really is. It's, it's the respect for other people, but it's also standing up for those voices who don't get to be heard and who have been historically quieted.
Yeah.
And those type of, standing up, that kind of thing, all for it. Let's, historically, there has been a lot of things that can do a lot of harm. There's a lot of harm, but there's a lot of good too. And, I wasn't part of those conversations. I wasn't in those rooms. So I can't make my own decisions, but
Sure.
I
And
have my own experience. And I brought that in
Yeah.
a little bit with, sexual assault and being told I was a sex addict. Those aren't healthy messages for a 16-year-old.
And why would you? Well, yeah. And first of all, why is a grown man having that conversation? That's what I'm
untrained.
Okay,
grown
yeah, that's
man telling me these
good.
things.
Yes, good point.
Yeah,
I just get fired up
you're not going to get that in a bishop's handbook. I'm sorry. Like,
yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah, you're right. I mean, but it's just wild to me because I have a daughter and I think about these things and I just go, like, I want her to, that's why I teach her self-defense in these things because I want her to be able to do this. But it's also just crazy. It's just, I'm like, no way, You're, and I will also, not everybody's like that. But the hard thing is like, and with those cases, it's like the hardest thing I had a problem with was there's no like appeal process, right? Like, you know what I mean?
Can I get a second opinion?
Yeah.
No,
the
God's
you were
word
the
is
right
God's
person
word.
to, yeah.
But we're going through a person, so even if that's what you believe, that's still getting
right.
someone's imperfect. Yeah,
absolutely. No, you
judgment
can say, hey,
is still coming through.
I don't get offended. Like I said before our podcast, like, I am not naive to the fact that we got that there's going to be some people who have to answer for some serious for some serious questions.
Yeah.
I believe
It's
that they'll have to answer for some serious questions
I'm
in
still
the
healing from
afterlife.
my own religious trauma. And so I really try to be a little more calm because I know in
Yeah.
years past and things like that, I was very anti-church and very
Hmm.
anti-Mormon and was really angry.
Yeah.
And now it's, I'm kind of healing from a lot of that aggression
Sure.
and a lot of
Sure.
that and kind of understanding, hey, I can't blame this bishop because again, he was doing his best. He was not trained. He was not given
Mm,
the tools.
wow.
Probably felt that he was doing the right thing, but not understanding the full spectrum
How,
because we don't talk about it kind of thing.
switching gears, maybe just a little
Yeah.
bit,
Yeah. Go ahead.
and feel free to like, you know, how answer this however you feel comfortable. But I'm curious. I had this conversation with another gentleman. We were on a similar train of thought, and he said something similar. He was like, they were just doing their best, and I had to learn how to heal from that. W- What was that process like for you? Like, how did you come to that conclusion? I mean, obviously, it took time, and like I said, whatever you feel comfortable sharing. But I just feel like that's such an amazing mindset shift to be able to think about that, and not a lot of people can do that.
I will give a lot of credit to my education and training.
Okay.
So being a coach, a health and wellness coach, and the the level of emotional intelligence you need to be a good coach and to help um, guide other people and kind of see the connections or disconnections that are there or aren't there. Um, you have to be really in tune. A lot of mind to body wellness. How do I understand the connection between these things? A huge piece was just shifting my internal locus of or my locus of control to internally, right? Instead of saying, I am this way because somebody else made this rule, instead of saying, this happened to me and it was really unfortunate, but I get to have the choice on how I deal with it. So it was a
Mhm.
lot of that. It was a very, very, very gradual. Like I said, it wasn't until
Sure.
I was in
Sure.
my mid 20s, a mom of three, that I finally was like, oh my gosh, that really was sexual assault. That wasn't me just doing this or that or just being a dumb
Mhm.
teenager. Um, which I was totally a dumb teenager. I made lots of mistakes, which is so valuable now. The
Yeah. Yeah.
hurt I went through has created the person I am now. And I have a lot of empathy for people who have gone through the same experiences or understand that same type of feeling. But taking that and
Mhm.
I think I just got so burnt out on blaming other people and
Yeah, that's a heavy package to
not feeling
carry.
like I had control over my life or the consequences. And so just, it's been a long shift. There's been other traumatic events that have happened in my life too that have just kind of been okay. This is what we're at. And so truly appreciate everything I've gone through. Um the pain is not comfortable. But most growth isn't comfortable, right? Like I don't
Absolutely.
know
Yes,
anyone
ma'am.
who says if growth is comfortable, I don't know if that's growth kind of thing. So,
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Wow. Well,
yeah.
thank you for sharing that story.
Mhm.
That'll bring a lot of hope to a lot of people. You know, that's really cool. I think that this conversation was great. I learned a lot from it as a parent, as a you know, as a girl and a boy dad. Um, yeah, wow. I'm just like, you know what I mean? It's like drinking from a fire hose. You hear that?
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
wow,
I'm
man, that's
here all
crazy.
day.
Like,
If you have more questions, I'm happy.
yeah, I think
Um,
that's cool. I think that's cool. But
yeah, super happy to help.
maybe switching a little bit just to
Yeah.
kind of end it on this on a cool note. Your podcast is coming up on 100 episodes. How
Yes,
does
we
that
sure
feel?
are. It feels really good, especially we've been through our own growing pains on the podcast.
In the
I
pod,
started
yeah,
with a
yeah, yeah.
co-host and then she left last year. Her business is booming and so how do I do this on my own kind of thing? And then remembering why I started and that mission of just bringing people, you know, safe, or I don't know if safe is, but expanding their awareness in a safe, non-judgmental way. And so I
Yeah,
was
yeah,
like,
yeah.
I
Okay,
gotta
yeah.
keep doing this. So there's been some things, happening. And then I went to an episode every other week. And so it's taken me longer to get to the 100th episode, but
Sure,
I'm
sure,
so,
sure.
so excited. And so we are having a party in Hooper, um, on this plot of land from, it's going to be really fun. It's really big out in the farmland, but
Okay,
that's
cool.
May 28th. We're going to have a big bonfire, axe throwing, cornhole, open
Oh, corn.
bar
Yeah, you had me
ish.
at ish. You had me at cornhole. That's like
Cornhole.
that's an Iowa game.
Ah,
Is all
gotcha.
the time. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
suck
I
at
guess
it.
it's an everywhere game, but I grew up in the Midwest, so
So if you need an easy win, come play me and it'll be fun. But there's going to be lots of podcasts there. So it's really going to be a
yes,
fun networking event too. It's just,
yeah.
um,
I heard about the party. I saw it on your Facebook, but I heard about it from Angel.
Angel. Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, great. And you've been on their podcast.
I have. I have.
Yeah. What a great. Yeah, those guys are fun. That podcast is fun.
Angel is like the biggest promoter and just like supporter. Anytime, like I said,
Yes,
it's sometimes
he
hard
is.
going on my own. And I'm like, I need a sounding board for like an idea. Should I do this? Should I do that? So I always send it to Angel and he's always like so supportive. It's
Yes, he
amazing.
is the pod father. Yes, he's
Yeah.
the pod.
Oh my God. I love that. Hashtag.
No, Angel. I mean, for when I started my podcast, I didn't know anybody in this community. Um, and I met Dre. So I met Angel through Dre.
Mm-hmm.
But when I met all of those podcasters, I was like, this is sweet. This
Yeah.
is really cool.
Super cool community.
Yeah, it is. But 100's amazing. I mean, that's the one thing about podcasting that I just really relate to life. It's like consistency.
Yeah.
It's
There's
just
a statistic that 50% of podcasts don't even pass their 7th episode.
yeah, that's
So many of them start and they just kind of, after they hit a couple barriers, or
right.
it's called pod fade, where they just slowly increase the time between episode releases, that they just kind of,
Right.
their audience dies, everything just fizzles. That's something that I'm like, I'm going to have to do like a hard stop. Dying by pod fade sounds so sad. And
Yeah.
there's so many infinite messages about sexuality and sexual
Yeah,
wellness.
I think you just go as long as you
It's never going to stop.
this podcast is, I have the same thing. I'm just gonna, even if I get 0 listens, I'm still gonna do it. Because this podcast for me is not about the audience or anything. I mean, yeah, of course I want to bring engaging conversations to my audience, but this is my journal. This is my personal journal.
Isn't it great?
Yeah,
So many
I suck at
wonderful like
writing.
ahas, and yeah, I'm not a writer. I hate writing, but I'll
Yeah,
talk.
yeah,
I'll
yeah.
talk all day long.
Exactly.
And
I was
super
like,
fun. Even just watching you and your realizations, and just, I bet going back and listening to this episode, you're going to even have even more connections and be like,
dang.
yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, I do. I just enjoy learning. And one of the reasons I started the podcast was I was frustrated. I would find myself in these conversations with people, and not to sound like egotistical, but I would say something and I'd be like, oh, dude, I remember learning that. And I just clicked and I was like, should I write it down? And I would try to write it and I'd be like, it doesn't sound the same when I write it down, because I'm not very good at that. Something I'm trying to work on, but I'm not good at that. I was like, I need to preserve these in audio form. And then I was like, oh, I could do a podcast. But then I was like, I don't have a co-host. Nobody in my circle wanted to do it with me anyway. And so I was like, well, why don't I just interview other people? And then I was like, why don't I just interview business owners? And now it's kind of progressed to like anybody that I think is very interesting, creatives, things like that. Conversations
I do have
that
a
I wish I had.
business. So,
Oh yeah,
that works too.
yeah.
But I mean, if anyone's interested in wellness coaching, I do that one-on-one wellness coaching. I do Zoom, or I used to do face-to-face, but I'm finding it's just harder and harder with connection and location more than
Yes.
anything. But
Yes.
that's balance your wellness.
That's
So,
cool. That's cool. Yeah,
it's
and
fun.
I knew you had a business. I just did. I was just
I'm
like,
not great with the business part. I'm just good with the coaching part. I want
That's
someone
fair.
else to run the business, and I am the, perfect coach.
There you
Shows
go.
up.
And that's what you should be. But sometimes I bring on people who are like off the beaten path of my regular show, and I'm just like, but this is and some people will be like, why'd you bring them on? I'm like, this is my journal. Like,
Yeah.
my kids are going to listen to this one day, and they're going to get a real idea of who I am. And
Oh,
that's
I
what I
hope my
want.
kids never listen to mine. I'm just kidding.
But it's
There are
like-
times that I say things and I was like, kids, if you're listening, don't listen now, because we're going to give personal
yeah.
info of what happens between dad and I.
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
I think I think it's important though. You know what I mean? Like, I wrote about this on LinkedIn, and we'll wrap up here in just a minute. I don't want to take all of your time. You've been more than generous with it. But I wrote on LinkedIn, I was like, because sometimes I'll go to work, or I'll be in like an interview or something, or I'll be at a networking event, and somebody random. I mean, it's really cool, but it's also like they're at a business networking event, or like my work, be like, hey, I listened to your podcast before, and I'm like, this is gonna go really good or really bad.
Yep.
This is gonna be like, I liked it, or you shouldn't be here.
When people
I'm ready
find
for
out
either.
about mine, I have the same reaction. I was like, or they ask if they can listen after they find out about it. And I was like, I mean, if you look at me differently after you listen, that's on you. That was your choice to listen. Like, because I do give some personal stories in that.
Sure.
Not so much anymore. But yeah, podcast learnings,
But
gotta love it.
yeah,
We can chat
yeah.
offline, but
Cool. Yeah, absolutely. Well, what was the website they can catch you at again?
saltysexcast.com. Or if you're interested in my wellness coaching, that is balanceyourwellnesstoday.com.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Mariah.
Thank you.
Really appreciate you being here.
Thank you. Stay sexy.